"This is my house," I said, and my son-in-law laughed. Not a chuckle. A full, contemptuous laugh, the kind that tells you exactly what someone thinks of you. He was standing in my kitchen, where I'd made pancakes for my daughter every Saturday morning for 18 years, and he laughed at me like I was the punchline to a joke I hadn't heard yet. I want to tell you what happened, all of it, because people always ask me, when I get to the end of this story, how did you stay so calm? And the honest answer is, I wasn't calm. I was terrified. I just knew how to be quiet. My name doesn't matter much. What matters is that I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer. I built a good life, and I did it in a house in Flagstaff, Arizona that I paid off completely in 2019. 4 bedrooms, a garage, a backyard with a ponderosa pine that my late wife planted the year our daughter was born. That tree is 32 years old now. So is my daughter, Haley. I raised Haley alone after her mother passed. Breast cancer, 2009. Haley was 19. We got through it together, the two of us, and I think that's why I gave her more grace than I should have, for longer than I should have. When you share that kind of grief with someone, you want to believe the best of them, even when the evidence tells you otherwise. She met Cody at a conference in Phoenix 4 years ago. He was in sales, medical device sales. He always specified, like the medical part elevated it somehow. He was 38, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who fills a doorway and seems to know it. First time I met him, he shook my hand too hard and talked for 45 minutes straight without asking me a single question about myself. I filed that away and said nothing because Haley looked happy, and happy was something she hadn't looked in a long time. They got married 18 months later. Small ceremony, nice enough. I gave them a check for $12,000 as a wedding gift because I wanted them to start well. Cody thanked me with a nod. The trouble started so gradually I almost didn't notice it. About 8 months after the wedding, Haley called me on a Sunday night. She and Cody had been renting an apartment in Scottsdale, but their lease was ending and the new rent was going to be nearly $3,000 a month. Cody's income was irregular, her word, because he worked on commission and they'd had a rough quarter. She asked if they could stay with me for a little while, just until they got back on their feet. I said yes without hesitating. She's my daughter. That house has 4 bedrooms. Of course I said yes. They moved in on a Saturday in March. Haley brought flowers for the kitchen table. Cody brought 43 boxes and a television so large it required 2 men and a furniture dolly. He set it up in the living room, displacing my reading chair to a corner without asking. I told myself it was an adjustment period. Everyone needs time. The first month was fine, mostly. We ate dinner together a few nights a week. Haley helped with groceries sometimes. Cody worked from the guest room during the day, on the phone constantly, his voice carrying through the walls in that particular way salespeople have. Smooth, insistent, relentless. At night, he watched sports at a volume that made the windows hum. By month 2, things had shifted in ways I couldn't quite name. The refrigerator was always rearranged. My things pushed to the back, their things in front. The thermostat, which I'd kept at 68 degrees for 15 years, was now at 74. When I turned it down, it would be back up within the hour. No conversation about it, just done. Cody started having friends over on Friday nights. Not asking. Informing. Hey, the guys are coming over tomorrow. Hope that's cool. And he'd say it walking away, so there was no natural moment to respond. I'd come downstairs on a Saturday morning and find 4 men I didn't know sleeping on my furniture. I talked to Haley about it. Privately, just the 2 of us, one afternoon when Cody was out. I told her I felt like a guest in my own home. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand and said, "Dad, you know how he is. He doesn't mean anything by it. He just takes up space." She smiled like this was an endearing quality. I smiled back because I love her, and I let it go. That was my mistake. I let it go too many times. By month 4, Cody had developed a habit of referring to the house as our place. Not to me, to his friends on the phone in conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. "Yeah, come by our place Saturday. We've got a great setup at our place." Small thing. I know, but the words settled in my stomach like a stone. He also stopped saying thank you. I don't know exactly when it happened. There was no single moment, but somewhere around month 4, gratitude dropped out of his vocabulary entirely. He'd come home, eat the food in the refrigerator, use the washer and dryer, park his truck in my garage, and it was simply the way things were. Like he'd always lived there. Like I was the one who was new. One evening I came into the kitchen and he was on the phone, leaning against my counter, and he waved his hand at me. Actually, waved at me like you'd wave a waiter away, because I was making noise getting a glass of water. In my kitchen. I stood there for a moment, then I got my water and went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed and I thought about my wife. I thought about the pine tree in the backyard. I thought about 31 years of work, of discipline, of building something carefully and protecting it, and I decided that I was done being waved away. I didn't say anything that night, or that week, but something changed in me. I started paying attention. Not just noticing, recording. I started keeping a log on my phone, just brief notes, dates, times, what happened. Nothing dramatic, just facts. And then I made an appointment with my attorney. His name is a detail I'll keep to myself, but he's been my lawyer for 20 years, sharp as anyone I've ever met. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I was done he said, "You need to give them formal written notice of the terms of their tenancy, because right now, legally, they may have more rights in that house than you realize." That was a cold splash of water. In Arizona, a person who has lived somewhere for more than 29 days has established residency. They can't simply be removed without proper legal notice. My own daughter and her husband, under my roof for 4 months, had tenant protections. We drafted a formal notice together, terms of residency, month to month, terminable with 30 days written notice. No guests overnight without approval. Shared expenses, utilities and groceries, split proportionally, starting the following month. No alterations to the property without written consent. The look on Cody's face when I handed him that document at the kitchen table was something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. The paper, the envelope, my signature at the bottom. "What is this?" he said. "It's a residency agreement," I said. "I need you both to sign it." "You're serious?" "Very." He looked at Haley. Haley looked at me. There was a long silence. Cody leaned back in his chair and smiled. That same smile I'd seen the first time I met him, the one that said he'd already decided how this was going to go. "Look," he said, in a tone a person might use with a confused elderly relative, "this is where we live. We're family. You don't do this to family." "Family," I said, "is exactly why I'm doing it in a reasonable and respectful way, rather than calling the sheriff." He didn't sign that night, but 2 days later, Haley talked him into it. She came to me privately, apologized, and asked if we could just move forward. I said yes, we could. I meant it. But Cody didn't forget. Men like Cody don't forget anything they experience as a humiliation. For about 6 weeks, things were quieter. The Friday night stopped. He was colder to me, but more careful, more aware that I was watching, that there were rules now with signatures on them. Haley seemed almost relieved, which told me everything I needed to know about what her daily life inside that marriage was like. And then came Thanksgiving. My sister drove up from Tucson. She's 71, widowed, one of my favorite people in the world. She and I always did Thanksgiving together after my wife passed. We had a whole routine. She'd bring her cornbread stuffing, I'd do the turkey and the pie, we'd watch the parade in the morning and argue cheerfully about football in the afternoon. It was our thing. She arrived Wednesday evening, and I could feel the temperature change in the house the moment Cody saw her. He shook her hand with that barely there grip people use when they're performing politeness, without feeling it. That night, he told me, not asked, told, that his people were coming for Thanksgiving dinner. 7 of them. His brother, his brother's wife, 2 cousins, and 3 friends. "This is my sister's Thanksgiving," I said. "Yeah, but it's a big house," he said. "More the merrier." "I didn't invite your guests, Cody." "I live here," he said, and he walked away. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to the pine tree move in the wind outside, and I made a decision. Not an angry decision, a clear one. I called my attorney the next morning, Thanksgiving morning, from my truck in the driveway. I told him what was happening. He reminded me that the notice period was 30 days and couldn't be accelerated without cause, but that there were things I could do in the meantime that were entirely within my rights as a homeowner. We talked for 22 minutes. Cody's guests arrived at 2 in the afternoon. By that point, my sister and I had eaten our Thanksgiving meal, just the two of us at the kitchen table, with the good china my wife picked out in 1993. It was quiet and warm and exactly what it was supposed to be. We finished by 1:30. When Cody walked his guests through the front door, he found the living room dark. He found the television off. He found the thermostat set to 62 degrees. He found me sitting in my reading chair, moved back to its proper position that morning, with a book. "What's going on?" he said. "Thanksgiving," I said. "Why is it freezing? Why are all the lights off?" "I prefer it this way." His brother's wife looked uncomfortable. His friends looked at each other. Cody's face went through several colors. Can you go upstairs?" he said to me. And there it was, the moment I'd been waiting for without knowing I'd been waiting for it. In front of 7 people, in my own living room, he asked me to go upstairs. I set my book down slowly. I looked at him for a long moment. "No," I said. I said it quietly, not angrily, just a fact. "This is embarrassing," he said, low and tight. "Yes," I said, "it is." I picked my book back up. My sister came downstairs at that exact moment, carrying 2 slices of pie on plates, and she sat down in the chair across from me without saying a word. We sat there together, the two of us, in our home, eating pie, while Cody stood in the entrance of the living room with 7 confused people behind him. After about 2 minutes, he led them all into the kitchen. I could hear him back there, loud and overly cheerful in that way people get when they're covering for humiliation. My sister looked at me over her pie. She raised an eyebrow. I shook my head slightly. She nodded. That night I delivered the 30-day notice in writing, as required by Arizona law, signed, dated, time-stamped. Haley read it twice and then sat down on the couch and stared at the wall. Cody scrumpled it and threw it on the floor. I picked it up, smoothed it out, and placed it on the counter. "That's your copy," I said. "I have mine. What happened in those 30 days I'll describe as evenly as I can." Cody became hostile in a way he no longer bothered to disguise. He stopped speaking to me directly, communicating only through Haley. He had people over deliberately, in violation of the residency agreement, because I think he believed it was unenforceable or that I wouldn't push it. I documented everything, date and time, exactly as I had been doing since month 4. My attorney sent a formal follow-up letter to Cody directly, citing specific violations of the signed agreement and noting that these constituted cause for expedited removal if they continued. Cody's response was to call me a word I won't repeat in my own hallway at 7 in the morning. I wrote it down. I added it to the log. On the 28th day, I had the locks changed. I was entitled to do this because I had documented violations of the residency agreement, and my attorney had confirmed that proper notice had been served. I had the garage code changed and the spare key retrieved from the lockbox outside. I did all of this on a Tuesday afternoon while Cody was at a sales meeting in Phoenix and Haley was at work. When they came home that evening, I was sitting on the porch. I had their house keys on the table in front of me, the keys to my house that had been on their keychains. I also had a cashier's check made out to Haley for the $12,000 they had given me from my wedding gift, returned in full. I had 2 large suitcases packed with enough clothing and essentials for a week. I had already called Haley's best friend, who had agreed, knowing the situation, to let them stay while they sorted out their next steps. I said, "The locks have been changed. Your belongings are safe inside, and you can arrange to move them out over the next 2 weeks, which I will schedule with you in advance. I've returned the wedding gift. Here's where you're staying tonight." I slid a friend's address across the table on a note card. Haley started to cry. "Dad, you can't do this." "I can," I said. "I have, and the law is clear on it, so please don't make this harder." Cody said nothing at all. He picked up the cashier's check, looked at it, looked at me, He was calculating something. After a moment, he folded it, put it in his pocket, and walked to the car. It was Haley I stayed on the porch for. We talked for a long time after Cody got in the car. I told her I loved her. I told her the door to my life was not closed to her, but the door to my house was closed to him, permanently and without negotiation. I told her that I'd been watching her for 8 months, and I was worried about her in ways that had nothing to do with me or this house. She didn't want to hear it that night. I understood that. She was loyal to him, and she was in pain, and she believed, probably, that I had done something unforgivable. She called me 3 weeks later. She'd found an apartment, a decent one in Flagstaff. I'd offered to help with first and last month's rent, which she initially refused and then accepted. She didn't say much about Cody. I didn't ask. I'd learned a long time ago that you can't talk someone out of a marriage. You can only hold the door open and wait. What I will tell you is that I had dinner with my daughter last month, just the two of us, at a restaurant downtown we used to go to when she was in college. We talked for 3 hours. She laughed twice, genuinely, in a way I hadn't heard in a long time. Before she left, she hugged me for longer than she usually does. That pine tree is still in the backyard. I can see it from my reading chair, now back where it belongs, next to the window. It was there before Cody arrived, and it'll be there long after. I'm 67 years old. I work for everything I have. I buried a wife and raised a daughter alone and paid off a mortgage and planted nothing in this life that I wasn't willing to tend. I don't regret being patient. I don't regret being quiet for as long as I was. But I also don't regret the moment I set my book down and said no. Some things belong to you. You decide how long you let someone else pretend otherwise. Where are you listening from, and what would you have done in my place? I keep thinking about that pine tree. My late wife planted it the year Haley was born, and for 32 years it has just stood there in the backyard, through drought and hard winters and the kind of wind that comes off the mountains in November and shakes everything loose. It never moved. It just held. I think that's what this whole thing taught me in the end. Not about Cody, not even about Haley, about what it actually means to hold. There's a version of this story where I stay quiet forever, where I keep waving off the discomfort, keep filing things under adjustment period, keep choosing peace over truth, because I've already buried one person I loved, and I cannot stand the thought of losing my daughter too. I understand that man. I was that man for 8 months. And I'll tell you what that version of quiet cost you. It cost you the thing you were trying to protect. You think you're preserving the relationship by absorbing everything, and what you're actually doing is teaching the other person that there is no floor, that you will go as low as they push you. What finally moved me wasn't anger. I want to be clear about that. The night I sat on the edge of my bed after Cody waved me out of my own kitchen, I wasn't furious. I was clear. There's a difference. Fury makes you do things fast and sloppy. Clarity makes you do things right. That clarity, the kind that comes from actually thinking through a situation, consulting people smarter than you, documenting what's real rather than just reacting to how it feels. That's what saved me. Not in a dramatic way, in a quiet, methodical way. In a quiet, methodical way. I called my attorney. I kept a log. I understood the law in my own state well enough to know what I could and couldn't do. I moved carefully and I moved correctly. And because of that, there was nothing Cody could do to undo what I had every right to do. People sometimes want a story like this to be about revenge. I understand the appeal, but that's not what it was. When I sat on that porch with the cashier's check and the note card and the 2 suitcases, I wasn't thinking about making Cody feel small. I was thinking about my daughter, about the fact that she described her own husband's behavior as, "He just takes up space," and smiled while she said it. That's not a woman who's happy. That's a woman who's learned to survive. The courage it took to hand her that note card, to say, "This stops here," even knowing she'd be angry, even knowing she might not speak to me for months. That's the part I'm most at peace with now. It would have been easier to keep the door open and call it love. Real love sometimes looks like closing the door and trusting that the person you raised has more in them than they're currently showing. She called 3 weeks later. We had dinner last month. She laughed like she used to. That's the whole story, I think. You do the right thing even when it costs you. You think before you act, and you act on facts rather than feelings, and then you hold. The way a tree holds, the way a paid-off house holds, the way a father holds, and you wait for the people you love to find their way back. Some of them do.